Meat will clog your arteries. No, wait, you need animal protein for muscle. Actually, plants have everything you need. Hold on, plant protein is incomplete and inferior. The internet cannot decide if animal protein is essential or dangerous. But what if I told you both camps are missing the most important part of the story? You'll hear one expert say that you need meat for muscle, another say it'll wreck your heart, and another say that plants just won't do it. But studies following over 200,000 people for over 3 decades show that it's not that simple. I'm a registered dietitian who talks to clients about protein every single day, and I have spent years in the actual research. Full studies, not just headlines. I've guided clients through omnivore, plant-forward, and fully vegan approaches. And here's what I know. You follow the data, not trends. The people who thrive understand the nuance I'm about to show you, so let's get into it. All right, we are starting with protein quality. So before we dive into which protein is better, we need to clear up this myth about protein quality because it definitely causes massive confusion. Traditional protein quality scores use things like protein digestibility, corrected amino acid score, and digestible indispensable amino acid scores. These rank proteins purely on amino acid profile and how well your body digests and absorbs them. And by those measures, animal proteins win every single time because they are complete proteins. They have all 9 essential amino acids in the ratios that our body really needs. They're especially rich in leucine, the amino acid that triggers muscle protein synthesis. Now, plant proteins are often lower in 1 or more essential amino acids, and they tend to be less concentrated per gram. That's why you'll hear them called lower quality or inferior. But now here's what those strictly lab scores completely ignore. Everything that comes with the protein. Animal protein tends to carry more saturated fat and 0 fiber. Plant protein rides along with fiber, polyphenols, magnesium, unsaturated fats. So when we're asking which is better, we can't just look at amino acids on a spreadsheet. We need to look at what happens to actual human health over 10, 20, 30 years. And that's where the research really gets interesting. So if protein quality isn't just about amino acids, what does the long-term data actually show? Let's start with the thing that everyone cares about most. Muscle. Because let's be honest, a lot of you guys watching want to know, will eating more plant-based hurt my gains? And that's what I'm going to answer. Here's what the research shows. Meta-analyses of randomized controlled trials demonstrate that animal protein leads to slightly greater increases in muscle mass compared to plant protein. We're talking about a small but measurable difference, especially in adults that are under 60 years old. Now, here's the key finding. There is no significant difference between plant and animal protein for muscle strength or physical performance outcomes. Now here's where it gets interesting. When researchers look at studies where total daily protein intake is high, we're talking a 1.6 to 2.0 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day, and matched between groups, both vegan and omnivore diets support similar muscle growth, strength gains, and muscle protein synthesis rates during resistance training. This holds true for both young and older adults as long as the plant protein source is high quality. If protein intake is low or borderline, let's say you're only hitting 0.8 to 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day, animal sources have a clear advantage for muscle mass. They deliver more leucine and essential amino acids per serving, so you kind of get more bang for your buck. If you're vegan or mostly plant-based, you can absolutely match the strength and performance gains by pushing total protein higher for people who lift, often in that 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight per day range. Also distributing protein evenly across meals throughout the day, and that's for everyone. The bottom line is for pure muscle mass, animal protein has a modest edge at lower intakes. But for strength and performance, which is what actually matters for most people, plant-based sources can absolutely match it when total intake is adequate and you're using quality sources. So the muscle question isn't, can you build muscle on plants? You absolutely can. It's, are you willing to be more intentional with your total protein intake and choose those high-quality plant sources? If yes, your gains are totally safe. Okay, so at lower protein intakes, animal protein has a slight edge for muscle mass, but when you eat enough total protein and use quality plant sources, strength and performance are basically equal. But what about the thing that actually matters more long-term? Your heart, your metabolism, your lifespan? This is where the data gets really clear and really surprising. And hey, real quick, hit that subscribe button. I have got way more science-backed nutrition info coming over to you. I appreciate each and every one of you subscribers out there. All right, heart health and longevity. And here's where we need to blow up the animal versus plant framing entirely because it's almost misleading. The data is absolutely crystal clear on red and processed meats. We are talking bacon, sausage, deli meats, pork, beef. Multiple large meta-analyses show that replacing those processed meats with plant proteins, fish or poultry, significantly reduces cardiovascular disease risk. A 2024 analysis followed over 200,000 adults for 3 decades and found that people with the highest plant to animal protein ratio, about 1 to 1.3, had roughly 19% lower cardiovascular risk and 27% lower coronary heart disease risk compared to those eating the most animal protein. And when researchers look at substitution studies, meaning what happens when you swap one protein for another, the pattern's pretty consistent. Replacing red meat with poultry gives you about a 12% lower coronary heart disease risk. Replacing red meat with fish, about a 16% lower risk. Replacing it with legumes or nuts, about a 16% lower risk. These benefits come specifically from replacing red and processed meats, which also improve cholesterol, blood pressure, and inflammation markers. But here's the part that gets completely missed in the animal versus plant war. Lean animal proteins like fish, poultry, and low-fat dairy don't carry these same risks. In fact, they often show neutral or even protective associations in the research. So the evidence isn't animal protein is bad for your heart, it's red and processed meats specifically drive the risk, while plant proteins and lean animal sources like the fish and chicken are protective or considered neutral. This distinction matters a lot because if you're avoiding chicken breast because you think all animal protein is dangerous for your heart, you're misinterpreting the science or someone's feeding you that information online incorrectly. So red and processed meat, minimize. Lean animal protein, fine. Plants, protective. What about weight loss and body composition? Because high protein diets are everywhere right now. If you want even more nutrition info and delicious recipes, I've got an email newsletter that I send out weekly. No bland chicken and steamed broccoli here. We're talking about flavor-packed meals and nutrition info that is backed by science. I'm going to drop the link below. Totally free, no fluff, just studies that actually matter and what they mean for your health. Weight loss and weight maintenance. Let's start with the good news. High protein diets are a proven effective tool for weight management. Meta-analyses and randomized controlled trials consistently show that high protein diets, we're talking 25 to 35% of your total calories or 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram body weight per day, result in greater short-term weight loss, more fat mass reduction, and better preservation of lean body mass compared to lower protein diets when you're in a calorie deficit. Now, these effects are the most pronounced in the first 3 to 6 months, where high protein diets lead to an average of 1 to 2 kilograms of additional weight loss compared to standard protein diets. Why does protein work so well? Well, there's 3 reasons. First, it significantly improves satiety. You feel fuller, which makes it easier to stick to a calorie deficit. Second, protein has a much higher thermic effect of food compared to carbs or fat, meaning that our body burns about 20 to 30% of protein's calories just digesting it and processing it, compared to 5 to 10% for carbs and 0 to 3% for fat. And third, protein can help offset the drop in resting metabolic weight that normally happens with weight loss. Both animal and plant-based protein sources work for weight management when protein amounts are sufficient. But plant-forward versions tend to improve cholesterol, blood pressure, and overall diet quality at the same time because of what comes with them. And here's the part that gets overlooked in all the protein debates: fiber. While everyone's obsessed with hitting their protein goals, and it is important, fiber intake is independently linked to better gut health, reduced colon cancer risk, better blood sugar control, and cardiovascular protection. Plant proteins deliver both protein and fiber, while animal proteins are strictly protein. So for weight and metabolic health together, a higher protein diet that leans heavily on plants with optimal portions of lean animal protein gives you the best of both worlds. Satiety, muscle retention during weight loss, and long-term metabolic and cardiovascular benefits. Okay, so plants win for fiber and metabolic health. Animal wins for protein density. But what about the other nutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, all the stuff that rides along with your protein? Let's break that down. This is important because protein doesn't exist in some isolation. You're always eating a packaged deal. Here's the animal protein strengths. Naturally rich in B12, which you literally can't get from plants. Highly bioavailable iron and zinc. Your body absorbs them way more efficiently than the plant versions. Dairy and fish bring calcium, iodine, and omega-3s. And animal proteins are extremely protein dense per calorie, which is helpful when your appetite is low or your energy needs are high, like if you're elderly, recovering from illness, or if you're an athlete. Now, plant protein strengths. They come packaged with fiber, magnesium, potassium, folate, antioxidants. They're mostly unsaturated fats instead of saturated. They're associated with lower LDL cholesterol and better cardiometabolic profiles when they replace red and processed meats. So here's the practical takeaway. If you go very plant heavy or fully vegan, you have to be intentional with B12. That's a non-negotiable. You need a supplement for those fortified foods. And you also need to watch for iron and zinc, sometimes calcium and iodine, and those omega-3s. If you go very animal heavy, you are likely getting too much saturated fat. You need to strictly limit those processed meats, and you're probably falling short on fiber and those plant compounds which protect against chronic diseases. Neither extreme is optimal. And I know I'm gonna hear from people on this that are in the carnivore camp or the strictly vegan camp. But the sweet spot for most people is in the middle, and we'll get to exactly what that looks like in just a minute. Now, before we go further, I know a lot of you are wondering, okay, but how much protein is actually in these foods? Let me show you a quick side-by-side. Here's the protein density question everyone asks. How do these actually compare gram for gram? So we have our animal sources. 4 ounces of chicken breast, 35 grams of protein. 4 ounces of turkey breast, 34 grams of protein. 2 eggs, 14 grams of protein. A cup of Greek yogurt, 20 grams. A cup of cottage cheese, 25 grams. Now for our plant-based sources. 10 to 11 ounces of tofu, 35 grams of protein. 7 ounces of tempeh, 35 grams of protein. 2 cups of cooked lentils, so a large amount, 36 grams of protein. 2 cups of cooked black beans, 30 grams. A cup of edamame, 18. Quarter cup of hemp hearts, 13 grams. Notice the pattern. Animal proteins are more concentrated and you get high protein in smaller amounts. Plant proteins require larger volumes to hit the same numbers, but those larger portions bring the fiber, phytonutrients, and often fewer total calories. Neither is better or worse. It's about understanding the math when you're planning your meals and hitting your protein targets and factoring that fiber in. All right, so you've seen the protein amounts and what rides along with them. But before we get to the practical recommendations, let me give you some important context on these health benefits we've been talking about. Because I don't want you to think that one protein swap is gonna be this magic fix. Here's the real talk. These mortality and disease risk reductions we've been discussing are real, they're meaningful, they're also modest. We're talking about 5 to 20% risk reductions, not miracles, but they are impactful. A 5% lower mortality risk per 3% of calories from plant protein compounds meaningfully over decades, but it's not going to override a terrible diet or chronic stress or sitting for 12 hours a day. It just won't. And here's something that often gets buried in the animal versus plant debate. Higher intake of total protein, regardless of the source, was associated with a lower risk of all-cause mortality, meaning that getting enough protein, period, matters for longevity. The source matters for optimizing that benefit, but inadequate protein is its own risk factor. Your overall eating pattern, total fiber intake, exercise, sleep, and stress management matter just as much or more than any single protein swap. I'm telling you this because nutrition science can sometimes make it seem like one food will save or kill you, and that's just not how it works. This is about informed optimization, not perfection, and certainly not fear. Small, sustainable shifts that you can actually maintain, those are what compound into real results over years. Now let's look at the actual framework. What does the evidence say you should prioritize? Here's a quick side-by-side you can screenshot. I want you to see these trade-offs clearly because this is not about good versus bad, it's about optimizing. Now you can clearly see this all in one graph. We can see differences in amino acids, differences in leucine amounts, differences in those muscle gains and performance, differences in heart and metabolic risk, and those vitamins and minerals. Plus, we have to factor in fiber and weight management. Okay, so you've seen the trade-offs. Now the question everyone's actually asking, which one should I eat? What's the optimal pattern? Let's get into the evidence-based hierarchy. So which is better, animal or plant protein? After reviewing decades of research, here's the evidence-based framework. Minimize red and processed meats. This data is clear, consistent, and dose-dependent. This isn't about never having a burger. It's about making it occasional, not habitual. These are the proteins consistently linked to higher heart disease and higher death risk. Include freely. Lean animal proteins, fish, chicken, yogurt, eggs, these are totally fine and offer muscle and nutrient advantages without the extra cardiovascular risk. If you eat these regularly, you're not hurting your longevity. In fact, fish shows protective associations for heart health. And prioritize plant proteins as your foundation. This is what the largest, longest studies point toward for longevity and metabolic health. These should be daily staples, not afterthoughts. Here's the practical framework most people should follow. Start with adequate total protein for your specific goals. Remember, higher total protein intake is associated with lower all-cause mortality, regardless of the source. So step one is getting enough, period. And we're gonna cover the exact numbers in my next video. Stay with me. Make plants your base. Aim to get a significant portion of your daily protein from legumes, soy, tempeh, nuts, seeds, and whole grains. Layer in lean animal protein strategically. Fish, chicken, yogurt, eggs. Use these as complements. They're tools for nutrient density and muscle support, especially if you're active or if you have higher protein needs. And red meat, occasional, not habitual. If you love a good steak, have it. Just don't make it your primary protein source multiple times a week. If you're chasing pure muscle with minimal planning and you're not a vegetarian, a mixed diet with a solid dose of dairy, eggs, fish, or lean protein is the simplest path to hit high quality protein targets. But, and I cannot stress this enough, don't forget about fiber. Gut health, heart health, and reducing colon cancer risk all depend on it. You can't just eat chicken and protein shakes all day and expect optimal health and longevity. If your priority is long-term heart health, metabolic health, and longevity, the most consistent signal in the research is keep total protein up, but shift a larger share of it towards plants and away from red and processed meats. This is where the 30-year data points. And here's the inconvenient truth that makes both sides uncomfortable. The populations living the longest aren't following either extreme. They're eating 80 to 90% plants with strategic animal protein layered in. It's not clickbaity, it doesn't sell diet books, but when you follow hundreds of thousands of people for 30 years, this is the pattern that keeps showing up. Now, I know what a lot of you are thinking, okay, but how much protein do I actually need? What's my target? That's exactly what we're covering in the next video, because eat more protein isn't helpful if you don't know what more means for you. So here's what I need you to do. First, if this video helped you cut through the confusion, hit that like button. It helps YouTube to show this to more people who are tired of the extremes and just want the evidence. Second, subscribe if you haven't already, because I have way more evidence-based nutrition info coming to you. If you want to go deeper than what I can fit into a YouTube video, I send out a weekly newsletter breaking down latest research, recipes, and so much more. The link's down in the description. All right, the protein needs video is up next. You can click it right here, and I will see you over there. Until then, eat well, be well, thrive.